Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review of Game of Thrones Season 5, Episode 1, The Wars to Come. So this review will be completely spoiler-free as far as the books are concerned, so if you haven't read them, that's okay, as long as you've seen up to Season 5, Episode 1. So that means making comments about things that happened in the books and not yet in the show. Please use spoiler tags, otherwise your comment will be deleted. So, Season 5 begins with the flashback to where Cersei was a little girl, and personally I felt this was an excellent casting choice to play young Cersei. She acts exactly as you would have expected a young Cersei would act, that is to say, like a stuck-up young little brat. Her and her friend charge into the hut of Maggy the Frog, a person known as being a witch, that can see your future. Maggy the Frog is a mage from Essos, which is why they call her Maggy, because it's a deliberate mispronunciation of mage. This is kind of like Melly Mazdor, whom Daenerys met in Season 1, who cursed Khal Drogo into becoming a vegetable and killed her unborn child. So personally, I think what she says should be taken seriously and will, of course, shape Cersei's life to come. Cersei asks if she'll marry the prince because at this time the Targaryens were still in power, and Cersei thought that she would marry the king's son, Rhaegar Targaryen. But of course that match wasn't to be, as King Aerys refused the match and married Rhaegar to Eolar Martell, Oberyn's sister, to whom he wanted revenge for in Season 4. Anyway, when Cersei asks if she'll have children with the king, Maggy the Frog answers that he'll have 20 and she'll have 3, which of course is in reference to how many bastards Robert sired and the 3 children she had with Jaime. So this is all the stuff that had already happened up to this point in the show. The other thing she says that have yet to occur in the show is that a younger and more beautiful queen will cast her down and take all that she holds dear. So obviously Cersei in present times thinks that's Marjorie, which explains part of why she hates her so much. Marjorie would appear to be the most likely candidate since she is a younger queen in conflict with Cersei. But George R.R. Martin likes to play with prophecy and misdirection, and I have a feeling it won't end up being Marjorie, but someone else Cersei didn't expect at all. And in fact, her fighting with Marjorie might even lead her to cause the very disaster she hopes to avoid. But that's just my guess. Some have theorized that it's actually Daenerys, but I myself am a fan of the theory that it will be Sansa, but we'll just have to see. And the other prophecy Maggy the Frog makes is that, referring to Cersei's 3 children, she says gold will be their crowns and gold will be their shrouds, which many believe means all 3 of her children will be at one point king/queen, and that all 3 will eventually die, which is interesting because 2 of her 3 children have already become king, Joffrey and Tommen, so that makes one wonder if in some way Myrcella will eventually become queen. And 1 of her 3 children has already died, so does this mean Tommen and Myrcella are also doomed to die? That's something else to think about. And I'll try not to talk about the books too much, but there's a very interesting prophecy from the books that this scene left out, and that is the prophecy that Cersei will eventually be killed by someone Maggy refers to as the Valonqar, which apparently is a term that means little brother. So of course Cersei assumes this means Tyrion, and that would explain in part why Cersei hates Tyrion so much. So I don't think the show left this out because they wish to change the person who may or may not kill Cersei eventually, but they did it because it's unnecessary in the show to give further explanation to why Cersei hates Tyrion so much. And why she now so desperately wants him dead. I think they figured this part of it stood better on its own. But regarding this prophecy, I think again it's a misdirection because I don't think it's going to be Tyrion but someone else. The most common theory is that it will be Jaime, since he was born slightly after she was. But since the show has left this prophecy out, it's uncertain if they'll follow this at all. So the next scene will, get into Tywin's funeral, which is kind of interesting that Jaime is all concerned with all the others trying to overthrow their position now that Tywin's dead, and that they see it as a sign of weakness, whereas Cersei remains unconcerned. In fact, I think Cersei is looking on the bright side of things and sees this as her chance to rule without Tywin getting in her way and telling her what to do. But that doesn't stop her into guilting Jaime for freeing Tyrion. But all in all, she wasn't nearly as mad at Jaime as I thought she would be. I do think it's because in part she's glad that Tywin's dead. So next we go to Meereen, where we see them tearing down the harpy from a pyramid. Now the harpy is the symbol of Meereenese tradition, one which the masters often use. So Daenerys is most likely tearing them down to symbolize that the old ways are over and that the people of Meereen need to get used to a new way of life. So then it's not surprising that the terrorist group known as the Sons of the Harpy target the Unsullied in charge of tearing down that harpy and murder him. I actually thought the tearing down the harpy thing would be a bigger deal because they made it seem like it was such a big deal in the trailer, but it wasn't really that big of a deal. The bigger deal was the murder of the Unsullied by the Sons of the Harpy, who apparently Daenerys already knew about, but they had never killed anyone before. What's also interesting is that the slave boy we first saw back in season 4, where Daenerys first took the city, has apparently become one of Daenerys' advisors. And it makes sense that she would want some locals on her council, particularly a former slave, to represent their interests. So next we go to the Wall, where they introduce the concept of a choosing for the new Lord Commander. The Lord Commander died all the way back in Season 3, and they're just getting around to electing a new one. Seems like that would have come in handy during the big battle in Season 4. Sir Alistair Thorne has been the acting Lord Commander, but it's now time to choose one permanently. Sam mentions that it's pretty much down to Alistair Thorne and a man named Dennis Mallister, who hasn't been in the show before, but he's the commander of the Shadow Tower, one of the 3 Night's Watch castles still in use, which has been mentioned in the show before. Also, it's interesting to see Gilly is still hanging around, and this time Sam is adamant that she stay. However, they're worried that if Sir Alistair becomes Lord Commander, that they will kick her out regardless because he doesn't like her very much. Next we see Melisandre escort Jon Snow to the top of the Wall where Stannis is waiting for him. There, Stannis mentions that he plans to attack Winterfell to overthrow the Boltons, and he wants the Wildlings to fight for him, and says that if Mance Rayder doesn't bend the knee and go along with this plan, he'll burn him alive. This was a really cool scene. I'm really excited to see Stannis in the Wall and his interactions with Jon Snow. I'm glad Stannis is finally brought into the main fold. Next we go to the Vale, where Littlefinger and Sansa are hanging out with Jon Royce, watching young Robin Arryn practice fighting and sucking horribly at it. Littlefinger and Sansa then depart, leaving young Robin in the capable hands of Lord Royce to go off on an adventure. What adventure? Well, apparently Littlefinger told Lord Royce they were going east to the Fingers, but Sansa notices that they are traveling west, so I guess we'll just have to see. Next, we get a scene with Brienne and Podrick, where Brienne is telling Podrick to go away yet again. This scene was so goddamn repetitive. It's just like their scenes together in Season 4. I'm personally getting a bit sick of this whole Brienne brooding and being all bitchy to Podrick. After that, we see Tywin's funeral reception where people give their condolences to Cersei and she ignores them. It also reintroduces 2 Lannisters, Lancel and Kevin. Lancel Lannister was King Robert's squire in Season 1, who many believe is partly to blame for his death, and he hasn't been seen since Season 2 when he was injured in the Battle of Blackwater. Of course, he looks entirely different now, as he has short hair and has become a religious fanatic, a part of a movement called the Sparrows, whom I'm sure we'll learn more about in the later episodes. Kevin is Tywin's brother, whom we saw briefly in a couple of episodes in season 1 and 2. And I'm surprised they kept the same actor for Kevin, because he was barely in the show before, and Game of Thrones seems to love to recast people. But I'm quite happy that they kept him, because I'm a fan of continuity. So next we see Loras in bed with another man, Oliver, the man who worked at Littlefinger's brothel, whom we saw seduce Loras in season 3, and who was having orgies with Oberyn in season 4. It makes me wonder why he's with Loras, because in season 3 he was just seducing him so he could learn information to pass on to Littlefinger, and since we know he works at a brothel, it makes me wonder if he's sleeping with Loras of his own volition, or does he have an ulterior motive, or is Loras paying him. Anyway, Marjorie comes in and kicks Oliver out and is mad at Loras for not being more discreet, where Loras doesn't seem concerned at all. Loras then mentions that his upcoming marriage to Cersei is pretty much null and void now that Tywin is not alive to enforce it. If you recall, not only did Cersei desperately not want to marry him, Lady Olenna wasn't a fan of this marriage either and had to be blackmailed into agreeing with it. So now they're sure it's not going to happen, which surprised me. I thought that maybe Kevin Lannister would try to force the issue, but apparently not. However, Loras tells Marjorie that it isn't necessarily a good thing for her, because it means that Cersei will remain in the capital and continue to be a hindrance to her. But Marjorie doesn't seem that concerned, suggesting she may have other plans to deal with Cersei. So next, we come back to Varys and Tyrion and Pentos having a conversation about Tyrion's future, where he seems content to drink himself to death, but Varys has bigger plans for Tyrion, specifically that Tyrion journey to Meereen and help Daenerys become the Queen of Westeros. And so the journey begins. I really like these scenes. Pretty much any conversational scenes with Varys and Tyrion are always really awesome. But the thing that bothered me is that Varys mentioned in these scenes that they're at his friend Illyrio's house. If you recall, Illyrio appeared in season 1 and was the man who arranged the marriage to Daenerys and Khal Drogo. So basically this was the same location where Daenerys first was at the start of the series. I was a bit disappointed that Varys mentioned Illyrio and yet he didn't appear. It's a shame. I would have liked to have seen him again. So next we go back to Meereen and see Dario and his daughter Zolorak return from their mission to Yunkai, which was apparently a big success. If you recall, back in season 4, the wise masters of Yunkai reclaimed the city and enslaved all the former slaves again. Daenerys originally sent Dario to Yunkai to kill them, but Jorah talked her out of it, so instead she sent his daughter Zolorak, and the noble local, with Dario to negotiate their surrender. So apparently it worked. In return, the Yunkai wanted Daenerys to reopen the fighting pits, which apparently was a gladiator type battle situation. His daughter was quite insistent, but Daenerys still refused. Dario even tried to convince her of this in bed, but she still remained indigent. Dario reminds Daenerys that her true power lies with the dragons, so she tries to visit them to see how it goes, but apparently not so well, as they are pissed off, which causes Daenerys to flee in terror. This is sort of presenting Daenerys as someone who is in big trouble, she's the mother of dragons, and one of her dragons has disappeared, and the other two are fucking pissed. So it doesn't look like things are going that well for her. So finally we come back to the Wall, where Jon tries to convince Mance Rayder to give in to Stannis' demands, but is unable to do so, as Mance Rayder would rather die than order his people to fight a foreigner's war. So Melisandre proceeds to burn him alive, and eventually Jon shoots him with an arrow to mercy kill him. Now it's kind of interesting to see everyone's reactions to Mance Rayder being burned alive, where Stannis looked pretty much the same way he always does. They could have been burning a roast chicken as far as Stannis' reaction goes. Tormund was close to tears, which makes sense seeing his good friend was being burned alive. Gilly was crying and couldn't bear to watch and sought Sam for comfort. And Selyse, the twisted little bitch that she is, of course, took pleasure in it and was smiling. But her daughter also couldn't bear to watch and closed her eyes. Anyway, I feel Mance's inability to surrender was it was in keeping with his character. And although I really liked the character of Mance Rayder, I think his death totally made sense and was in keeping with the story. So, my rating for The Wars to Come is a 7. Very good. It was a pretty typical Game of Thrones season premiere where not much happened and it functions mainly as a setup. And I don't think it was as good as season 4's premiere, but it wasn't bad either. There were a lot of interesting moments, from introducing the Threat of the Sons to the Harpies, to Cersei's flashback to the prophecy, which will certainly play a part in Cersei's mindset going forward. And seeing Stannis deal with Mance Rayder. So all in all, an interesting episode, but nothing spectacular. So that's it for my review of The Wars to Come. You should check out my channel for many other Game of Thrones videos. If you have read the books, keep an eye out for discussion videos I do with Apkin Tomko, where we'll go far more into book spoilers. And of course, I'll be doing this non-spoilerly review every week, so make sure you subscribe to keep up with all that. And thanks a lot for watching.